Okay, today we're going to be doing something a little different, but I think it's definitely on the same vein. We're going to be making some pizza, you know. It's one of my favourite dishes, you know, universally loved, and I've been making it for quite a few years now, and I definitely think I've perfected the recipe. This will be part 1, and I'll only be making the dough, but in part 2, which should be coming out on the same day, we'll be putting it in the oven and so on, and give all the other details. So let's get into it. So for this recipe we're going to be using cups, which is basically just a different version of measuring things. 1 cup equals 128 grams. You're only going to need the 1 cup measurement and the 1/3 cup measurement. For the ingredients, you're going to need, for 4 pizzas, you're going to need 4 cups of strong white bread flour. You're going to need around 4 tablespoons of olive oil, a bit of yeast, some dry yeast, and you're going to need 4/3 cup of warm water. So that's 2/3 cold water plus 2/3 hot water. First we take our strong white bread flour, 4 cups of it, and sieve it into a large bowl. So let's do that. So now we've got our flour, we just gonna add the yeast. I usually just add a little bit, you know. That might be a bit too much, but there's no real right or wrong. And then just mix it together a bit. We make a well just at the bottom there. You can see just at the bottom of the bowl. We take 4 tablespoons of olive oil. Then after that we add our 4/3 warm water. And then we get a spoon and we mix it all together. Sometimes you might want to add a bit of salt to add a bit of flavour, but it's not really necessary for the recipe. Okay, so once you mix it all together and it'll form a soft dough, there's still a bit of flour at the bottom, but you know, it starts to take shape. You should then tip it onto a board. Now it's just mixing the little extra bits that may have fallen off. Now at this point, if it's a little too dry, then you may want to add a bit more olive oil, or if it's too wet, then add a bit more flour. Usually it'll be too wet, but usually don't change it at all if it's not falling apart too much. So once you've mixed it together and it's starting to form a more solid shape, then it's at this point I like to add a few herbs and spices. Basically it consists of things like thyme, marjoram, you know, like Italian herbs, and just sprinkle a few on top because it really adds to the flavour of the dough, but it's not necessary. That's why I haven't put it in the ingredients list. Then you just need to work it a bit. It's at this point you want to start kneading. The way I knead is simply just going like that, then folding it over, stretch, fold it over, stretch, fold it over. And then you might want to add a few more spices, a bit of salt, and then just knead again. Definitely does add flavour to the final dough. Minimum knead for about 5 minutes, but maximum about half an hour. I'm going to knead for 10. Every so often, if the dough starts to stick to the bottom, you'll need to add a little bit of flour. This is really just to squeeze the air out of the dough, and then later on we'll leave it to rise, which gets the air back in, and it's that process that really makes a good pizza. Okay, so I've kneaded for 10 minutes. It's quite hard work, but once you get there, you get good quality pizza. It should feel kind of wet, moist, rather than dry. And then you either wash and dry your bowl, or else get a new one. You need quite a large bowl. Then, just an add-on, I usually put a few spices of the same kind, herbs at the bottom, as well as a bit of flour so the dough doesn't stick. And then I just place it in here, and then we'll leave this in a warm place with a tea towel over it. So I put this in the greenhouse with a tea towel over it and leave it for a minimum of an hour, but usually it's best to leave it for more. So for instance, if you're starting to make the actual pizza at 6, you would start at around 4:30, so you can have half an hour to make the pizza. You probably won't need that much for a beginner, you probably will. And then you have an hour to let it rise, and then you can make it at around 6. So that concludes part 1 of this video. When part 2's out, go check that out. That'll explain how to make the actual pizza. And I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you